thought it'd be valuable to kind of talk about just kind of some of the mistakes people make when using SaberSim, and specifically when using SaberSim and coming from a traditional optimizer, what some of those common mistakes are, because fundamentally, traditional optimizers and SaberSim function very differently, but it's not always easy to grasp. So I wanted to ask Max, I guess if you could kick it off, just what common mistakes do you see people make when switching to SaberSim from a more traditional optimizer?
Yeah, so I get a lot of Twitter DMs about this, so I'm also acutely aware of this. So everything that we do with SaberSim is based on our simulation data, and it has to do with using correct slider settings. So we have our correlation slider, we have our ownership fade slider, and we have our smart diversity slider. And that's basically the complete key to our entire process. And I see a lot of people who will DM me on Twitter and they'll show me their sliders and they'll be like, how does it look? And it'll be something that's outrageous. Like, it has nothing to do with the preset settings, and it shows a lack of understanding of the sliders. And so I think one thing that is really important is educate yourself about what SaberSim actually does. There's a lot of videos that Danny and I have made that explain it in detail. You can ask us on the Slack channel. You can, we're happy to answer any questions, especially Matt, who created this whole thing, knows it pretty well. So I think if you want to get better at using SaberSim, you have to understand what each slider does. Because once you have that understanding, I think you'll find actually that the build process becomes way easier, and you're not actually making as many adjustments post-build, which I think is another big mistake that I think a lot of people do, is they just try to control too much, right? As they try to set too many settings before they build. After they build, they're adjusting exposures too much. And the thing is all you should be worrying about is making correct projections, adjusting the projections so they're as correct as possible, and adjusting the ownership projections so they're as correct as possible. And if you do those two things well, and you understand our sliders and set them correctly, you're going to make really good lineups, especially in sports where correlation is very important, like NFL, hockey, baseball, et cetera. Like things where that's really important, you're going to make lineups that are certainly better than lineup optimizers out there, right? So focus on projection, ownership projection, understand the sliders, make sure they're set right to the right tournament that you're playing, and you should do pretty well.
Yeah, I think I'm just adding to that, I think one mistake you can make is just not trusting the solver to do what's optimal. You shouldn't try to hack it to do what you want. You should trust it to do the right thing based on whatever projections you have. So don't if the solver's not getting someone that you really want to get, and you agree with his projection, but you feel like he should be in lineups, no, he shouldn't be in lineups. The solver knows better than you. You got to trust it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that kind of touches on a good point, where it's not as though we're saying SaberSim is perfect. It's obviously not. No tool is going to be. And even though we're spending a ton of time and always will be improving it, you do have to kind of ask yourself, okay, what is the tool telling me? Because we're not functioning as a glorified spreadsheet, which optimizers basically are. We're actually considering things like upside. And so there is insight in what SaberSim will give you. And so if you, like you said, Danny, if you do agree with the projections, if you agree with the ownership, the point projection, but you disagree with the exposure that you're getting in your build, there's some disconnect there, because we're saying, based on everything you've given us, this is how much you should get that person. And if you don't disagree with any of the variables going in, then you should really check that assumption. But again, that's why it always goes back to those projections, because that's where you do want to make adjustments and you do want to improve and build on what we've given you. But once everything is dialed in, it's not as though you just kind of set it and forget it and don't make any changes from there. But you do want to kind of at least listen to what we might be trying to say.
Right. I think using the post-build adjustment features that we offer should be making small changes, and we call it quality control, right? You're making small adjustments to make sure you get a little more diversity, maybe get a little more of this player, a little less of this player, but you shouldn't be changing the entire build with just post-build. You should be adjusting projection, and you should be adjusting ownership projection, or you should be adjusting the sliders, because your sliders are not correct for the GPP you're playing or the cash game you're playing. But you don't really need to be adjusting things, and you shouldn't be adjusting things too much, trying to basically rig your lineups to get them right, because you don't need to do that with us.